Hello everybody. Today we're going to start working on percent proportions. We're going to be talking about percents within this next unit. And this is the last section of things that we're going to learn this year. So the percent proportion is what we're going to be talking about right now. And you guys are all very well of percents. You should have this notes page in front of you. There is a Google Doc of it. You could type right on it. If you want to print it and then write it out, you can do that as well. Okay, and we're going to be using the percent proportion to find different parts, I don't know if that's the right word, different parts or of a percent or the part of a percent or an actual whole, or we're going to be finding the percent, and we're going to be using two different percent proportions, and as you can see, they're right there. One of the numbers is called the part, and that's being compared to the whole quantity, called the base. Okay, the other ratio is the percent, and it's written as a fraction whose base is always 100. So that 100 is always there, and you are all well aware that all percents are based out of a 100. Now, you're going to see that some examples we are going to have numbers lower than 100%, but you could also have numbers higher than 100%. Some of you right now have a grade in fourth marking period that is over 100%. Some of you have lower than 100%. And we're going to use these two proportions. There's two that I will use interchangeably, and it kind of depends on the problem. We have the is over of proportion, is, which is the part, or and of, which is the whole, okay? Or part over whole, we could call it that. Okay, either one, and I'm going to show you using both of those in these notes. Okay, and again, the percent is always over 100, okay? Your part is the percent, okay? So if you have a 95% in my class, that's the part of your percent that would be out of 100%, okay? So let's take a look at some of our problems here. For number one, we're going to use this proportion, is over of equals percent over 100. Okay, and the first one says 5 is what percent of 8? So we're going to use that proportion, is over of equals percent over 100. Okay, and that's where everything always goes. The 100 is always here, okay? And the first thing that I always like to look at in the problem is the percent, okay? Because the percent is pretty easy to find, okay? So if you look at number one, 5 is what percent of 8, okay? When you see the word what percent, that's obviously what we're looking for, and that's where my variable is going to go. I don't know the percent, so I'm going to use an X. I'm going to put that in my percent spot. Okay? Then I always like to look for the word of. Okay? And the word of, when you find the word of, the number after the of is always your of. And this is the order that you should always plug in your numbers. So you find your percent first, then you find the word of, and the number that is right after the word of is always going to be your of. So the 8 will go in the of spot, okay? And whatever is left over, that's going to be your is, okay? Whatever's left in that sentence. So 5 will be my is, okay? That's your proportion. Now, we solved proportions right before we left for the COVID-19. We were solving proportions, and you guys know how to solve a proportion like this. Okay, we could use the cross product property, which a lot of you are very comfortable with, and in this problem I would totally use the cross product property. So we are going to multiply 8 times x, and we get 8x, and then we are going to multiply 5 times 100, which would be 500. So we have 8x equals 500. There's a one-step equation. How do you solve that? You divide by 8 on both sides. Okay, and my 8's cancel out here. And I am left with x equals 500 divided by 8. You should be using a calculator on these when you need to. The 5 times 100, you obviously should be able to do that in your head. When you do that on your calculator, you get 62.5. Okay, and we're going to always round our percents to the whole. So that's going to be 63%. We'll round percents to the whole. Although you could have half of a percent and 0.5%, that's okay. We're just going to round the percents to the whole, so that would be 63%. And anytime you have a percent, you have to make sure you put that percent sign. So when I'm looking for that percent, you have to label it with the percent. Okay, let's take a look at number 2. On number 2, we have what percent of 5 is 11? And we're going to use that same proportion. Is over of equals percent over 100. Okay, and the first thing we're going to look for is the percent. What percent of 5 is 11? Very similar to number 1. What percent? I don't know the percent, so I'm going to put in an X. And of course, I forgot to put in that 100. Okay, that's always there. The next thing that I'm going to look for is going to be the word of. What percent of 5 is 11? So the number right after the word of is your of. So 5 is my of. Whatever is left will be my is 11. Okay, and there's your proportion. Once you're there, you should have no problem solving this. So we're going to do cross product property. I'm going to multiply 5 times x, which is 5x, and 11 times 100, which is 1100. Set that equal, and you have your one-step equation. So to solve this, I'm going to divide by 5 on both sides, and 5's cancel out. I am left with x on the left side equals 1100 divided by 5. You could use your calculator for that. You get 220%. Now let's talk about this one for a minute. Okay, is it possible to have over 100%? Yes, it absolutely is. Okay, some of you have that as a grade, like I said earlier. If you look, my is, which is the part, is 11, and my whole is 5. When you see numbers like that, that's telling you that your percent is going to be over 100, and you should, when you see a problem like that, you're not wrong. You could have over 100%. Okay, and when your number on the top is bigger than your number on the bottom, you're going to have over 100%. Okay? Next question, number 3. We have 36 is 72% of what number? So we're going to use the is over of equals percent over 100 proportion. We're going to plug in our 100 here. And the first thing I'm going to look for is my percent. Now it's real easy here because look at that. I have 72%. Okay, it has the percent sign. Once you put that over 100, you no longer have your percent sign. You basically changed your percent to a fraction. You put it over 100. All your percents are based out of 100. Then I'm going to look for the number that is after the word of. So I'm going to look for my of. Of what number? Of what number? I don't know the number. When I don't know a number, I'm going to use the variable. So that's going to go in my of spot. And the last thing I'm going to find is my is. Whatever's left is my is, and that's 36 in this case. Okay, so there's my proportion. We're going to solve it. Solve it by using the cross product property. 72 times x is 72x. And then we are going to multiply 36 times 100 is 3600. Okay, we're going to solve that one-step equation, by dividing by 72 on both sides. My 72's cancel out here on the left. And this should be real simple. At this point, we've got these solving of a one-step equation down. And 3600 divided by 72 is 50. So 50 would be my whole. Now always look at your answer again. I've said this to you before. Does that make sense? We had 36 as our is, that's our part. 50 is our whole, our of. 36 of 50, 72%. Okay, looking at your numbers, you want to make sure it makes sense. Half of 50 would be 25. That would be 50%. It's more than 25. So yes, that always is helpful too. Okay, looking at number 4. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to look at 72 is what percent of 160. Okay, we're going to plug in to our proportion is over of equals percent over 100. And we're going to plug in our 100. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to look for is my percent. What percent? Okay, I don't know the percent, so we plug in our value of x. We don't know x. Then I'm going to look for the word of, and the number after the word of is going to be my of. 72 is what percent of 160. That's my of. Oops, that's... Okay, and then whatever is left will be my is. So I have 72. That's my is. Okay? Your of is always after the of. The is could go either way. So that's why I always say go in this order. Find your percent, find the word of, the number after your of is your of, and then whatever's left is your is. Okay, we're going to use cross product property. 160 times x is 160x. And 72 times 100 is 7200. And we're going to solve that by dividing by 160 on both sides. Okay, my 160 cancels out here. And on this side we're left with x equals 7200 divided by 160, 720 divided by 16. You get 45, and we were looking for our percent, so that would be 45%. Okay, if you don't put that percent sign on there, it's wrong. You have to have that percent sign, 45%. Next problem, you want to make sure that makes sense. Well, half of 160 would be 80, so it's a little under 50%. Sure, that does make sense. Number 5, we have what percent of 8 is 12? So we're going to use our proportion. Again, is over of equals percent over 100. And we're going to fill in our 100. Okay, then I'm going to look for my percent. What percent? Okay, I don't know the percent, so that's going to be the x. Okay, then I'm going to look for my word of 8. That's my of. And whatever's left is my is. So I'm going to put 12 as my is. Okay, what do you notice about this? We have 12 is my is and 8 is my of. So my percent is going to be more than 100 or less than 100. Well, 12 is bigger than 8, so it should be over 100%. Okay, we have 12 times 100 is 1200. And then we have 8 times x, which would be 8x. Okay, we're going to solve our one-step equation by dividing by 8 on both sides. And I'm left with x equals 1200 divided by 8 is 150%. And remember, that was a percent, so you have to have that percent sign there. Okay, number 6, we have 19 is 132% of what number? Always going to use the is over of equals percent over 100. I gave you these spots on your paper so you could write this proportion over and over again. It'll help you remember it. Plugging in my 100. First thing I'm going to look for is my percent. It's a dead giveaway, has the percent sign on it. What do you notice about that percent? It's over 100. Okay, let's keep that in mind. The next thing I'm going to look for is my of, the word of, what number? I don't know the of, so I'm going to use my variable x, and whatever is left will be my is, so 19, okay? Now, since it's over 100%, the value of x should be less than 19. Remember, we talked about over 100%, it happens. Okay, let's solve this. We have 19 times 100, is 1,900, and 132 times x is 132x. Okay, we're going to divide, solve that, divide by 132 on both sides. And I get 1900 divided by 132. I'm going to use a calculator for that, I'm pretty sure. Okay, hopefully we all have calculators. And we get a decimal here, so we get 14.393, and that goes on. Okay, for these problems, we don't have an exact number. We're going to round that to the nearest, as long as you round correctly. If the directions don't say, I'm actually okay with that. Let's round this to the nearest tenths. 14.4, or you could round it to the hundredths, 14.39. And that is I was looking for the F, so that's my answer, equals X. Okay, 14.4. If you wrote 14.39, that's okay, 14.393. Okay, we're not going to be major sticklers on the rounding unless the directions tell you how to round, then you should follow directions. Okay, so those are the basic is over of, using is over of equals percent over 100. Okay, now we're going to use the part over whole on the next few. Okay, it makes a little bit more sense on these word problems when you have these word problems using part over whole. So the next one says 54 of the 90 books on a shelf are history books. What percent of the books are history books? So thinking here, we're going to use part over whole. I'm going to write this a little bit bigger for myself because I should have made that bigger. Part over whole, you have plenty of room, I'm sure, hopefully, equals percent over 100. That's what you're going to write for your first proportion here, okay? Now I'm going to plug in what I can. 100 is always there, and I'm going to look for my percent. Well, the question says what percent, so I don't know the percent. I'm going to use an X. You could use a P, you could use any variable you want. Okay, we have 54 of the 90 books. Now, these word problems, it's important for you to think about the problem. Would 54 of the 90, what would be my part and what would be my whole? That's what you're thinking here, okay? So my whole, the total, which would be like comparative to the 100, just like when we wrote proportions, okay? And I believe we did talk about this percent proportion a little bit when we did do proportions, okay? My whole would be 90, okay? That's the total, so that's going to go down here. And the part is going to be the 54, okay? So that's going to go here. So it's 54 is my part, 90 is my whole. We're looking for the percent. There is your proportion. So we're going to find the cross product property. 90 times x is 90x, and 54 times 100 is 5400, and you're going to solve that. One-step equation, you're going to divide by 90 on both sides, and you get x equals 5400 divided by 90 is 60. 60%, and let's look back at the problem and label that a little better. What percent of the books are history books? So 60% are history books. So I'm going to write history books. Okay? Now you got to be careful because sometimes wording on these word problems, they may give you all this information and then the question will say what percent of the books are not history books. Okay? So in that case, you could use this same proportion, 54 over 90 equals x over 100, but when you got to the end, well, if 60% are history books, what percent would not be history books? So you would subtract that from 100. Okay, so those are problems you may see in the future. Okay, so reading these are very important. Question number 2. We have if 12 of the 75 animals in a pet store are parakeets, what percent are parakeets? Okay, so we're going to use the proportion part over whole equals percent over 100. And I could plug in my 100, always the same, okay? And the question is asking what percent. So I don't know the percent, that's where my variable is going to go. Okay, if 12 of the 75 animals in a pet store, okay, so what do you think would be the part and the whole? You got to think about these questions. 75 animals, that's going to be my whole, that's the total, okay? Your whole could always be thought of as your total. So we have 12 of the 75 animals. 12 would be my part. 12 of the 75 animals in the pet store are parakeets. What percent are parakeets? That's your proportion. 12 over 75 equals x over 100. Okay, let's cross product property. We have 75 times 100. 75 times x is 75x. And then we have 12 times 100 would give me 1200. We're going to divide by 75 on both sides, solving that one-step equation. 75's cancel out, and I'm left with x equals 1200 divided by 75 is 16, and that is a percent. 16%, and let's just make sure we label this properly. 12 of the 75 in the pet store are parakeets. What percent are parakeets? So it's 16% parakeets. Now, if it said what percent are not parakeets with all this information, we would write, we would subtract that from 100, and it would be 84% are not parakeets, but it's asking about parakeets, so we're okay. Okay, last question. We have, of the fish in an aquarium, 26% are angelfish. If the aquarium contains 50 fish, how many are angelfish? So we're going to use the proportion part over whole equals percent over 100. And we're going to plug in 100. Okay, so the question is asking there's 26% are angelfish. Of the 50 fish, how many are angelfish? So my percent here is 26%. Put that over 100. Get rid of that percent sign because you put it over 100. Okay? Then we have the aquarium contains 50 fish. Would that be my part or my whole? 50 fish, we want to know how many are angelfish. 50 is my whole, so that's going to go here. I'm looking for my part. Which part of the 50 are the angelfish? There is your proportion. Okay, we're going to solve that. 100 times x is 100x. And 26 times 50. 26 times 50 would be, what would that be? 1,300. Okay, and again, you should be using a calculator if you need to. And we solve that by dividing by 100 on both sides. And 1,300 divided by 100 is x equals 13. And that would be 13 angelfish. Okay, let's just make sure that makes sense. It's 26%. Okay, if 13 out of 50 are angelfish, does it make sense? Yes, it does. If you got like a number bigger than 50, you obviously made a mistake. If you got a really large number, that's where you would make mistakes. So there is your notes for today. If you have any questions, please send me a message or we'll talk about that. Okay? Have a great day.